Welcome to Learn from the Sleeping Legend. Tonight we explore the life and mind of Aristotle, a man who believed that nothing exists without purpose, and that a good life is not found in pleasure or speed, but in balance, reason, and quiet mastery. As you listen, allow your thoughts to slow. There is nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to analyze. Simply let the ideas drift and settle naturally. Relax and enjoy. Ancient Greece in the 4th century BCE was a place of remarkable intellectual energy. Stone temples rose against blue skies, markets filled with voices discussing ideas, politics, and the nature of reality itself. This was a civilization that valued thinking as a fundamental human activity. Aristotle entered this world in 384 BCE, born in the northern town of Stagira. His father, Nicomachus, served as physician to the Macedonian king. This detail matters more than it might seem. Growing up in a physician's household meant growing up around systematic observation, careful diagnosis, and attention to physical reality. While other children learned through stories and tradition, Aristotle learned to look closely at the world. How does the body work? What causes illness? What treatments produce results? These questions shaped his mind before he ever studied philosophy. The habit of careful observation, of noting patterns and relationships, of trusting evidence over assumption, these became foundational to everything he would later accomplish. His childhood in Stagira was relatively brief. Both his parents died while he was young, and he was raised by a guardian. This early loss perhaps contributed to his later emphasis on self-sufficiency and the importance of developing one's own judgment. When you cannot rely on others to provide all answers, you learn to think independently. The Greece of Aristotle's youth was not a unified nation, but a collection of city-states, each with its own government, customs, and character. Athens stood out as the intellectual center, drawing students and teachers from across the Mediterranean world. It was a place where ideas competed in public forums, where philosophers gathered students in gardens and covered walkways, where debate and discussion filled the air. This was the world Aristotle would eventually enter, not as a native, but as an outsider seeking knowledge. At 17, Aristotle traveled to Athens. The journey itself was significant, leaving everything familiar, crossing unfamiliar territory, arriving in a city where he knew no one. He came to study at Plato's Academy, the most prestigious philosophical school of the time. But Aristotle did not arrive as someone destined for greatness. He arrived as a provincial youth with an unfamiliar accent, different manners, and no family connections in Athenian society. He was an outsider, and this status would mark him throughout his life. Being an outsider has advantages. You see things established insiders miss. You question assumptions that others accept automatically. You bring a fresh perspective, precisely because you don't quite fit. Aristotle's outsider status may have been uncomfortable, but it shaped his ability to think independently. At the Academy, he encountered Plato, one of history's most influential philosophers and a student of Socrates. Plato taught that true reality exists beyond the physical world we perceive. He believed in eternal, perfect forms, ideal versions of everything that exists. The trees and chairs and people we see are merely imperfect copies of perfect forms, existing in a realm accessible only through reason. Aristotle studied under Plato for nearly 20 years. He absorbed Plato's teachings, engaged with his ideas, and developed profound respect for his teacher's brilliance. Yet even while learning, he began to question. Where Plato looked beyond the physical world to find truth, Aristotle kept returning his attention to the world around him, to actual trees, actual animals, actual human behavior. This wasn't disrespect. It was intellectual honesty. Aristotle recognized that his mind worked differently than Plato's. He couldn't accept ideas simply because his teacher proclaimed them. He needed to examine, test, and verify through observation. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, but capturing something true about Aristotle's character, that he said, "Plato is dear to me, but dearer still is truth." Whether he actually spoke these exact words matters less than what they represent. The courage to disagree with someone you respect deeply. This is difficult. It's easier to either blindly follow authority or completely reject it. The middle path, taking what's valuable while questioning what doesn't fit, requires both confidence and humility. Confidence to trust your own observations and reasoning. Humility to recognize you might be wrong, and to maintain respect for those who see differently. Aristotle demonstrated that true intellectual maturity means thinking for yourself while remaining open to learning from others. You honor teachers not by repeating their ideas unchanged, but by engaging seriously with their thinking and building upon it. After Plato's death, in 347 BCE, Aristotle left Athens. The Academy's new leadership leaned heavily toward mathematical and theoretical approaches that didn't align with Aristotle's growing interest in empirical observation. So he traveled, spending time in Asia Minor and on the island of Lesbos, where he conducted extensive studies of marine life and animal behavior. These years of observations and classification proved crucial. While studying nature directly, Aristotle developed his systematic approach to understanding the world, an approach that would influence science for 2,000 years. One of Aristotle's central insights was teleology, the idea that everything in nature has a purpose or end goal. An acorn's purpose is to become an oak tree. An eye's purpose is to see. Everything exists not randomly, but directed toward its proper function. This perspective shapes how you see the world. Instead of viewing nature as chaos or mechanism, you see it as organized toward ends. The bird building a nest acts purposefully. The seed sprouting seeks its mature form. Purpose permeates reality. Now consider what this means for human life. If everything has a purpose, then you do too. But unlike plants and animals, which automatically fulfill their nature, humans must discover and choose to fulfill theirs. An acorn becomes an oak tree without deciding to. It simply grows according to its nature. Humans must actively engage in the process of becoming what we're meant to be. Aristotle believed human purpose centers on reason. The distinctive human capacity is rational thought, and therefore human flourishing involves developing and exercising this capacity. Not reason in isolation, but reason guiding action, relationships, emotions, and choices. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or living purely intellectually. It means allowing rational thought to organize and direct all aspects of life toward meaningful ends. Emotions have their place, but guided by reason. Physical needs matter, but understood within a larger context of human flourishing. The question, "What is this for?" becomes a tool for examining your life. Why this career? Why this relationship? Why this habit? When actions connect to clear purpose, they gain meaning. When disconnected from purpose, even productive activity feels empty. Plato taught that perfect forms exist in a separate, non-physical realm. The physical objects we experience are merely imperfect copies. Aristotle rejected this dualism. He argued that form exists within physical things themselves, not in some distant realm. Consider a tree. For Plato, individual trees are imperfect copies of the perfect form of tree. For Aristotle, each tree fully is what it is. Tree-ness exists in the tree itself, not elsewhere. The form and matter combine in the actual physical tree you can touch. This seemingly abstract disagreement has practical implications. If essence exists within things themselves, then meaning is present in your actual life, not waiting in some perfect ideal state. Your circumstances, relationships, and choices matter now, not as mere shadows of something better elsewhere. This is a grounding insight. You don't need to escape physical reality to find truth or meaning. You don't need to become someone completely different. Understanding what you are and developing that potential, that's the path forward. Aristotle saw individual things as complete realities, worthy of study and understanding in themselves. This validates careful attention to particular situations, specific contexts, and individual circumstances. Universal principles matter, but they manifest in concrete particulars. Aristotle analyzed everything as composed of matter and form. Matter is the material something is made from. Form is what gives that material structure, organization, and identity. A bronze statue requires bronze. That's the matter. But bronze alone doesn't make a statue. The form, the shape, the structure, the organizing principle turns bronze into a particular statue. Both matter and form are necessary. Neither alone is sufficient. Apply this to human life. Your circumstances are like matter, where you were born, your natural abilities, the resources available to you. These establish possibilities and constraints, but form, your habits, values, choices, character, shapes what you become within those circumstances. You may not control all your circumstances, but you shape your responses to them. This is empowering without being naive. Yes, circumstances matter significantly, but within any circumstances, choices about how to live still exist. Over time, small choices compound, gradually forming character and life direction. A lump of clay has potential to become various things: a bowl, a vase, a sculpture. The potter's form-giving activity determines what it becomes. Similarly, your life contains potential shaped by the form you give it through daily choices, habits, and practices. This perspective avoids two extremes. It doesn't claim you can become anything regardless of circumstances. Matter sets real limits. But it doesn't reduce you to mere products of circumstances either. Form-giving activity matters enormously. Aristotle developed a framework for understanding anything completely: the four causes. To truly understand something, you need to know the material cause. What is it made of? What's the matter that composes it? The formal cause. What shape or structure does it have? What's its form? The efficient cause. What brought it into being? What made it happen? The final cause. What is it for? What's its purpose or end goal? Take a simple example: a house. The material cause includes wood, stone, and other building materials. The formal cause is the architectural design that organizes those materials into rooms and structures. The efficient cause is the builders who constructed it. The final cause is providing shelter. That's what the house is for. Now, apply this framework to your own life activities. Consider your work. What materials, time, energy, skills does it involve? What form or structure does it take? What brought you into this work? Most importantly, what is it for? That final question, what is it for, cuts through confusion. Many people feel exhausted not from working too hard, but from working without clear purpose. Activity without direction drains energy. Activity with clear purpose energizes, even when demanding. Aristotle believed understanding the final cause, the purpose, is crucial for understanding anything fully. You might know what something is made of and how it works, but still miss its essential nature if you don't know what it's for. This applies to habits, relationships, projects, and life patterns. Before changing something, understand its purpose. Before adding something new, clarify what it's for. This simple question cuts through much unnecessary complexity. Unlike philosophers who distrusted physical senses as misleading, Aristotle trusted sensory observation as the starting point for knowledge. Before abstract reasoning, before theoretical frameworks, comes simple attention to what is. He spent years observing nature, classifying plants, dissecting animals, watching behavior patterns. This wasn't casual observation, but systematic study. He noted similarities and differences, organized specimens into categories, looked for underlying patterns in diversity. This empirical approach seems obvious now, but it was revolutionary in his time. Most philosophers prioritized pure reason over physical observation. Aristotle insisted both were necessary. Observation provides the raw material that reason then organizes and understands. Think about how this applies to daily life. Before forming opinions, observe carefully. Before making decisions, gather information. Before assuming you understand, look more closely. This simple practice, attending carefully to what's actually happening rather than rushing to conclusions, improves judgment dramatically. In a world of instant reactions and rapid judgments, Aristotle's patient observation offers an alternative. Slow down. Notice. Attend to details. Let patterns emerge gradually, rather than forcing premature conclusions. This doesn't mean never forming opinions or making decisions. It means grounding them in careful observation, rather than assumption, prejudice, or rushed thinking. Aristotle essentially invented formal logic as a systematic discipline. He created rules for valid reasoning, ways to ensure that if certain things are true, certain other things must follow. His syllogisms became famous. If all men are mortal, and Socrates is a man, then Socrates is mortal. This seems simple, almost obvious. But Aristotle showed that this pattern of reasoning, this logical structure, applies across countless situations. Logic isn't about winning arguments. It's about thinking clearly. It's about recognizing when conclusions follow from premises and when they don't. It's about detecting flaws in your own reasoning before acting on it. Think of logic as mental hygiene, the practice for keeping thinking clean and organized. Just as physical space becomes cluttered without regular cleaning, thinking becomes confused without regular discipline. Logic provides that discipline. The goal isn't perfect reasoning. Humans are fallible, and even careful logic can start from false premises. The goal is reducing unnecessary confusion, catching obvious errors, and thinking more clearly than you otherwise would. In practical terms, this means pausing before reacting. It means asking, does this actually follow from that? When someone makes a claim. It means examining your own conclusions with the same scrutiny you apply to others. Aristotle distinguished between different types of knowledge. Theoretical knowledge concerns unchanging truths, mathematics, logic, first principles. Technical knowledge involves making or doing specific things, carpentry, medicine, music. But the most important knowledge for living well is phronesis, practical wisdom. This is the ability to discern what to do in particular situations. It's not following rules mechanically, but judging wisely in context. Practical wisdom requires experience. You can't learn it from books alone. You develop it by facing situations, making choices, observing consequences, and gradually refining your judgment. Like learning to balance on a bicycle, it requires practice and develops over time. Someone with practical wisdom sees nuances that rules miss. They recognize that this situation differs from that one in ways that matter. They balance competing concerns, timing, relationships, consequences, principles, and find appropriate responses. This isn't purely intellectual. It involves perception, emotional intelligence, and character. You need to notice what's actually happening, not what you expect or want to happen. You need emotional steadiness to judge clearly under pressure. You need good character because practical wisdom serves virtue, not cleverness in pursuing any goal. Imagine standing at a crossroads, literally or figuratively. Practical wisdom is the capacity to assess the situation accurately, consider relevant factors, and choose well. Not perfectly. Wisdom doesn't guarantee perfect outcomes, but choosing with good judgment, informed by experience, observation, and understanding. Aristotle's ethics center on finding the appropriate middle ground between extremes. Courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity is the mean between stinginess and wastefulness. Proper pride is the mean between servility and arrogance. This isn't about mathematical midpoints or compromising between opposites. It's about finding what's appropriate to the situation. Sometimes circumstances call for boldness, sometimes for caution. Practical wisdom determines what's appropriate when. This framework recognizes that the same action can be too much in one situation and too little in another. There's no universal rule that works everywhere. Context matters. Particulars matter. Judgment matters. For example, giving money away could be generous or wasteful, depending on how much you give, to whom, when, and why. The virtuous person judges well, in particular circumstances, rather than following rigid rules. This approach to ethics is demanding. It would be easier to have simple rules to follow mechanically. But human life is too complex for simple rules to work well. Different situations call for different responses, and developing the judgment to respond appropriately requires practice and experience. The goal is becoming the kind of person who characteristically chooses well, not following rules, but having character shaped toward appropriate action. This happens gradually through repeated choices that slowly form habits, and habits that slowly form character. Aristotle's ethics aim at eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but better understood as flourishing or living well. It's not about pleasant feelings, though those might accompany it. It's about fulfilling your nature as a human being, actualizing your potential, living according to reason and virtue. Eudaimonia is an activity, not a state you achieve and then maintain passively. It's the ongoing activity of living well, making good choices, exercising virtue, engaging your capacities appropriately. This flourishing requires external goods to some extent: health, resources, relationships, opportunities. Aristotle wasn't naive about material conditions, but these are necessary conditions, not sufficient ones. Wealth alone doesn't produce flourishing. Health alone doesn't produce flourishing. These enable but don't guarantee living well. The core of flourishing is excellent activity, doing what humans distinctively do and doing it well. This centers on rational activity, but not reason in isolation. It's reason guiding all aspects of life: work, relationships, emotions, pleasures, community involvement, creative expression. Think of flourishing like a plant thriving. A plant doesn't try to thrive. Given proper conditions, soil, water, light, it naturally grows toward its mature form. Human flourishing is similar, but requires active choice. We must choose to develop our capacities, practice virtues, and engage in excellent activity. This isn't about perfection. It's about overall life direction and characteristic activity. Someone living well might still face setbacks, make mistakes, experience bad luck, but their overall pattern of living exhibits virtue, reason, and appropriate engagement with life's possibilities. Aristotle observed that humans are naturally social creatures. We live in communities, form relationships, participate in collective life. This isn't optional or arbitrary. It reflects human nature. We develop language, which only makes sense in social context. We form families, friendships, political associations. We create culture, art, and institutions. These aren't just useful arrangements. They're expressions of what we are. This means individual flourishing can't be separated from social context. You can't live well in complete isolation or in a dysfunctional community. Personal virtue and social conditions intertwine. Friendship, for Aristotle, is essential to good life, not casual acquaintances, but genuine friendship, caring about another person for their own sake, sharing life activities, supporting each other's flourishing. True friendship requires virtue, because only good people can genuinely wish good for others, rather than using them for personal benefit. This social nature also means political engagement matters. The community's laws, customs, and institutions shape conditions for living well or poorly. Good communities promote virtue and create environments where people can flourish. Bad communities do the opposite. This perspective suggests that ethics and politics can't be completely separated. How should I live? And how should we organize our community? Connect intimately. Personal virtue requires supportive social conditions. Good social conditions depend on virtuous citizens. While Aristotle valued practical virtue and social engagement, he considered contemplation, theoretical understanding pursued for its own sake, the highest human activity. This seems strange to modern ears. Why is thinking about abstract truths superior to helping others or creating useful things? His reasoning. Contemplation exercises reason most fully. It's self-sufficient, not depending on external resources. It's pursued for its own sake, not for further goals. It's the activity most similar to what we imagine divine activity would be. Pure understanding, without need or deficiency. This doesn't diminish practical virtue. Most of life necessarily involves practical engagement, and living virtuously matters enormously. But moments of contemplation, understanding for its own sake, represent human capacity at its peak. In modern terms, this values intellectual curiosity, learning, wonder, and the pursuit of understanding beyond practical application. Reading philosophy, studying nature, contemplating mathematical truths, understanding history. These activities have intrinsic worth beyond any useful application. This might seem elitist or impractical, but Aristotle's point is that humans have capacity for understanding that transcends immediate needs, and fulfilling this capacity contributes to flourishing. Not everyone must become a philosopher, but everyone can appreciate understanding and wonder. Aristotle recognized that virtue doesn't emerge automatically. It requires education, not just intellectual learning, but character formation through habit. You become brave by doing brave acts repeatedly until bravery becomes characteristic. You become generous by practicing generosity. You become honest by habitually telling truth. Virtue is like skill. It develops through practice. This has implications for how we approach character development. You can't simply decide to be virtuous and instantly become so. You must practice virtuous actions even before they feel natural. Over time, with repetition, they become easier, more natural, more characteristic. This also means early education matters enormously. Habits formed young shape character deeply. Children should practice good actions repeatedly, developing patterns that will serve them throughout life. But habit formation continues throughout life. You can develop new patterns, break old ones, and gradually reshape character. It requires sustained effort and often guidance from those further along, but change remains possible. This perspective is both demanding and hopeful. Demanding because it requires sustained effort and practice. Hopeful because it means you can develop virtue through consistent practice rather than requiring some innate quality you either have or don't. Finding the appropriate middle ground between extremes requires discernment. It's not automatic or formulaic. Consider a few examples. In facing danger, the coward feels too much fear and acts defensively when action is needed. The reckless person feels too little fear and acts dangerously when caution is appropriate. The courageous person feels appropriate fear, enough to recognize danger, but not so much as to be paralyzed, and acts appropriately. In pleasure, the self-indulgent person pursues pleasure excessively or inappropriately. The ascetic rejects pleasure in ways that diminish life unnecessarily. The temperate person enjoys appropriate pleasures in appropriate ways without being controlled by them. In self-assertion, the servile person undervalues themselves and allows others to dominate. The arrogant person overvalues themselves and dominates others. The properly proud person values themselves accurately and treats others with appropriate respect. These aren't mathematical calculations, but judgments requiring perception and experience. The appropriate response depends on context, who's involved, what's at stake, what outcomes are likely, what principles apply. This is why practical wisdom is so important. Rules can't capture all relevant factors. You need developed judgment to navigate complexity well. And judgment develops through practice, reflection, and learning from both successes and failures. Aristotle saw politics as continuous with ethics. Ethics concerns individual flourishing. Politics concerns creating communities where flourishing is possible. They are two aspects of the same inquiry into living well. Good laws and institutions promote virtue among citizens. Bad ones corrupt character and prevent flourishing. The political community's structure matters enormously for human development. Aristotle examined different constitutional forms: monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, and their corrupted versions. He looked for arrangements that promote virtue and prevent corruption. His analysis is practical, based on observing actual political systems rather than imagining ideal states. He valued political participation as part of human flourishing. Citizens should engage in governing their community, not passively accept rule by others. This engagement develops practical wisdom and virtue while creating legitimate governance. This doesn't mean everyone must be intensely political, but it does mean the community's health matters for individual well-being, and individuals bear some responsibility for collective good. In modern terms, this suggests we can't be purely private persons, unconcerned with public affairs. The quality of our political community shapes conditions for living well or poorly, and we share responsibility for those conditions. Aristotle himself lived largely the life he praised, studying nature, teaching students, organizing knowledge, contemplating first principles. After his years traveling and observing, he returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum. The Lyceum became a center for systematic research and teaching. Students studied everything from politics to biology, from logic to literature. Aristotle gathered specimens, organized observations, and developed comprehensive theories across multiple domains. His teaching method involved walking while discussing ideas. Hence, his followers were called peripatetics, from the Greek word for walking around. This detail captures something about his approach. Thinking wasn't purely abstract, but embodied, active, engaged with the physical world. He produced an enormous body of work, covering logic, metaphysics, ethics, politics, biology, physics, psychology, poetics, and rhetoric. Much of what survives appears to be lecture notes rather than polished writings, but even so, the range and depth is remarkable. After Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, anti-Macedonian sentiment in Athens made Aristotle's position precarious. He left Athens reportedly saying he wouldn't allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy, a reference to the Athenians' execution of Socrates. He died the following year at age 62. Aristotle's influence on Western thought cannot be overstated. For nearly 2,000 years, his works formed the foundation of education in philosophy, natural science, and ethics. Medieval scholars called him simply the philosopher, as if no other required mention. His logical works shaped the study of reasoning. His biological observations wouldn't be superseded until the rise of modern science. His ethical and political theories continue influencing contemporary debates. His metaphysical categories structured how people understood reality. This doesn't mean everything he wrote was correct. Modern science has corrected many of his specific claims about nature. But his method, careful observation, systematic organization, logical analysis, helped establish scientific and philosophical inquiry as disciplines. The questions he asked remain relevant. What is the good life? How should communities be organized? How do we develop virtue? What is the relationship between matter and form? How do we think clearly? These aren't questions we've definitively answered and moved. Aristotle's philosophy offers a comprehensive vision of human life and flourishing. At its center is the idea that humans have a nature and purpose, and that living well means fulfilling that nature through rational activity and virtue. This requires developing practical wisdom through experience and reflection, learning to judge well in particular situations, forming virtuous habits through repeated practice, becoming characteristically disposed toward appropriate action, engaging reason to guide all aspects of life, work, relationships, emotions, pleasures, participating in community, and contributing to conditions for shared flourishing, cultivating friendships based on mutual care and shared values, pursuing understanding for its own sake, exercising distinctively human capacities for wonder and contemplation, finding appropriate balance in all things, avoiding extremes through practical wisdom. This isn't a simple formula you apply mechanically. It's a way of approaching life that requires ongoing attention, practice, and development. There's no point at which you've achieved virtue completely and can stop trying. Living well is an activity, not a state. What can Aristotle teach us today, more than 2 millennia after his death? Several lessons seem particularly relevant. The importance of careful observation before rushing to judgment. In an era of instant reactions and quick takes, Aristotle's patient empiricism offers an alternative. The value of developing good habits and character over time. Quick fixes and instant transformation might sound appealing, but real development happens gradually through sustained practice. The need for practical wisdom beyond following rules. Complex situations require judgment, not mechanical rule following. The recognition that humans are social beings whose flourishing depends on community. Extreme individualism misses something essential about human nature. The idea that life has purpose and direction beyond immediate pleasure or success. Connecting activity to meaningful ends provides sustainable motivation. The insight that living well requires engaging your distinctive capacities. For humans, this means developing and exercising reason. These aren't abstract theories, but practical orientation for living. They don't provide simple answers, but framework for approaching life's complexity with wisdom and virtue. As you settle into sleep, consider what Aristotle spent his life exploring. What it means to live well, to flourish as a human being, to develop virtue and wisdom. His answer wasn't mystical or complicated. It centered on living according to nature. Your nature as a rational social being capable of understanding choice and growth. This doesn't happen overnight. It's the work of a lifetime, pursued patiently through daily choices, gradual habit formation, and accumulating experience. Like Aristotle walking through gardens observing plants, or sitting by the sea studying marine life, or discussing ideas with students, each moment offers opportunity for attention, learning, and growth. You don't need to become a philosopher or scholar. You simply need to engage your life with awareness, make choices guided by reason, develop virtuous habits, and pursue what's truly good, rather than what merely appears attractive. This is challenging but not mysterious. It requires patience, but that patience produces real development over time. Small choices compound. Habits form character. Character shapes life direction. Rest now, knowing that flourishing emerges from sustained attention to living well, from patient development of virtue and wisdom, from engaging your capacities fully and appropriately. Like Aristotle observing nature, bringing calm attention to what is, you can approach your own life with similar patience and care, noticing, reflecting, choosing wisely, and gradually becoming more fully yourself. The path is simple to describe, but takes a lifetime to walk, and that's appropriate. Living well isn't a problem to solve, but an activity to engage in day after day, choice after choice, until good living becomes characteristic and natural. Sleep well, and let these ancient insights settle quietly into your mind, perhaps influencing how you see your life and choices when you wake.